Not the series India dreamed of at the start of August, despite being a thoroughly absorbing contest from the standpoint of cricket viewers from a neutral perspective. Now, our cricket expert and former New Zealand all-rounder Chris Harris joins us from Christchurch to look back upon India's English test. Chris, thank you for your time and welcome back to Wion. The series finale at the Oval echoed the sentiment of the five tests. India fought and fought bravely at times, but in the final calculations, they were a clear second to England.
Yeah, the scoreboard 4-1 I don't think was a fair indication of this test series. I thought it was a brilliant test series and it was great fun to watch. Look, for me, it was a test series of missed opportunities for India. I think, in that first test match to lose by 51 and then they got comprehensively beaten in that second one. And then a brilliant comeback in the third one. And again in the fourth test, got themselves in a position where they could have won it. So I think it was a test series, as I said, of missed opportunities. But I still think there's lots of positives for both sides, and particularly India, even though the scoreboard, 4-1 doesn't look that impressive.
Yeah, you spoke about the seizing of moments, Chris, and that's something you'd link with experience. But you look at most of the game changers for England, and they were either young players or players who aren't regulars in the team. Sam Curran defined the outcomes of the closest test matches of this series. Chris Woakes only played 2 tests but hit a century at Lord's. Moeen Ali returned after 6 months and repeated what he'd done to India back in 2014.
Yeah, it was an absolute key. As I said, we talked about those crucial moments. You looked at a player like Sam Curran, as you said, he'd only played 1 test before the series. And look, I thought he was not only useful with the ball, but I think his biggest contribution came from the bat, which would have surprised most people before this test series. And that, for me, was the difference in this whole test series, was that middle to lower order and the way that England were in trouble at times and were able to fight back and get reasonable totals. We saw Sam Curran do it on sort of 2 or 3 occasions. You rightly pointed out Chris Woakes only played 2 tests. I guess at best he's middle to lower order, and he scored 100. And then you had Moeen Ali, who hadn't played much cricket in 6 months and came back. And who would have thought that he would have been the leading spinner in that particular series when you look at the quality spin that India have. So, yeah, it's a great point that perhaps some of their more inexperienced players for England, for me, made the difference in this series, because I think both probably top orders will be very disappointed with their series. Kohli, for me, obviously being the standout, scoring almost 300 runs more than the next best batsman. I mean, he was just leagues above everyone else. But if you take his numbers out, the rest of the batting for India was pretty disappointing.
The irony for India, Chris, is that if you look at their spate of defeats in tough non-subcontinental conditions, most losses in the past were attributed to the lack of a potent bowling attack. Yet this time it was the other way around completely. The bowlers consistently delivered the goods, but the batsmen just didn't back their efforts.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Normally you'd say it was the seamers from India that have let them down, and especially overseas, where you'd probably argue that Indians' results haven't been as good as they would have liked. But if you look at this series, the top 5 bowlers, 3 of them are Indians. Sharma bowled well, Shami, and also Bumrah, I think, showing that he's got a part to play in India's future in Test cricket. So there was lots of positive, and for me, it wasn't the seamers that let them down. It was the batsmen and possibly the spinners. So I just think India didn't score enough runs, and I thought their 3 seamers, as I said, in the top 5 were the absolute key. But if you look through both the statistics, from a bowling point of view, if you go through the top 10, there was 6 English bowlers and only 4 Indian bowlers, and it's the same in the batting. The top 10, again, it was the 6 from England and only 4 from India, and that, in the end, was the difference.
Yes, batting and spin bowling were a bit of a letdown for India. But a word on Hardik Pandya too, Chris. We spoke at the start of the series about how pivotal he could be to India's chances. And you saw an exhibit of that when he played a vital role in that solitary win at Trent Bridge. But that performance was an exception rather than the rule. And a non-performing Pandya severely alters the balance of this Indian team, don't you think?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one. I think in that test match, as you rightly pointed out, he showed what he's capable of, as a lot of the Indians did at different times through this test series. But what we need, or what India need, I should say, is just some consistency. And unfortunately, that was lacking for not only, as you said, Hardik Pandya, but a lot of the other players as well. But yeah, we need those guys now that have played a little bit of test cricket just to start standing up, take the responsibility, and they've really got to get a little bit more consistency, not only for their own sake to continue their Test career, but for India's sake going forward. I think if they get that consistency in all those areas, then they'll be a force to reckon with overseas as well.
Just as a bit of an aside before we move on, I heard you say "we" there a couple of times. Look at how Indian broadcast has altered you, sitting all the way back in New Zealand. Amazing. But let's look at the other side of things too. We spoke of England's unseasoned caps doing wonders for them. But what a lovely finish the Oval Test accorded to one of the true modern-day greats. Wasn't it just wonderful to watch Alistair Cook put the lid on a stellar career the way he did?
Oh, it was phenomenal. And look, if there's one player that deserved to go out on top, it was Alistair Cook. He's been one of the consistent performers for England over a long period of time. And it just showed what he means to the players. Another person that I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, Jimmy Anderson, when he was being interviewed and what it meant to him to lose a player that he'd played a lot of cricket with, and the respect, the fact that he could hardly talk because it was such an emotional time because one of his great mates that he's played a lot of Test cricket with was leaving Test cricket. So I was so pleased for Alistair Cook to score that 100, and it ended up being a vital 100 in his final Test innings. That was the way he deserved to go out, and you can't be anything but very happy for the man that deserved to go out that way.
Yeah, you've led me on to the next point there. Yes, James Anderson, now the most successful fast bowler in Test history. Can't tell how much longer he'll be around considering he's 36, but the man he surpassed, Glenn McGrath, believes he's going to go on and scale the 600-wicket landmark as well.
Yeah, it shows the quality of Jimmy Anderson. The thing that impressed me so much in this Test series, I mean, you look at over his career, he's one of the only, I think he's the only fast bowler to go past 563 wickets, going past Glenn McGrath now with 564. But it was just the quality of his bowling. You'd expect, as you rightly said, he's now 36. You'd expect the pace to have dropped off a little bit, not being able to bowl quite as long as spells. But I think Joe Root touched on it in the press conference. This is probably the best he's seen Jimmy Anderson bowl in a very long time. So, look, I think if he looks after himself, he could perhaps have 2 or 3 years left in Test cricket, and I'm convinced he'll go past that 600 wicket mark. And that's just an incredible feat for a fast bowler, not only to take that amount of wickets, but to be able to stay fit enough at his age to get that amount of wickets. That's generally the problem. And as I said, I firmly believe he could be around for another 2 or 3 years the way he bowled in this Test series. And, not only has he got the record, but he was the leading wicket taker by about 6 wickets. I think he ended up with 24 wickets. So he was a major reason that England were I guess, so dominant in this Test series.
Absolutely. As we wrap this conversation up, Chris, despite the contrasting emotion given the gulf in the scoreline, there was a common thread to what the captains had to say at the end. Both Virat Kohli and Joe Root believe the series was a glowing endorsement for Test cricket. Do you agree with that thought? Yeah, look, I think it was a great Test series. I mean, we look at the scoreline 4-1 and some would go, oh, it was pretty comfortable for England. But I think if you go through each Test match individually, as I said, India had opportunities to win Test matches. It could have so easily have been 2-2 or 3-2. And as I said, India lost that first Test, which I guess took the momentum away at 31. But I firmly believe for both teams, there's a lot of positives to take out. I mean, you come home after a series, even if you've played poorly, you've got to try and look at the positives. Sure, you've got to work on your weaknesses, but there are a lot of positives for both teams. And I think that's what both teams have to look at. So, yeah, look, I really believe, and I mean that it was a great Test series, and I felt a bit sorry for India because I don't think the 4-1 result was a fair reflection of this series. I thought it was a lot closer than that. Yes, it was an absorbing series, and we're glad to have wound it up with this engaging conversation. On that note, thank you so much, Chris Harris, for your time. Always a pleasure having you with us here on Wion. Thanks very much. Always a pleasure. Look forward to the next one.